So thank you very much for having me as a speaker today. And I was asked to speak about how cannabinoids affect pain. And before I jump into pain, I wanted to first remind everyone that pain is a component of inflammation. And if you can look at the graphic, remind the audience that the characteristics of inflammation include heat, also known as color in Latin, redness, rubor, swelling, tumor, pain, dolor, that's what we're going to speak about today, and loss of function. Now, when you bang yourself, hurt yourself, and you feel pain, that's called acute pain. And that's necessary for the survival of any species. I mean, just imagine if you were not able to feel that acute pain, you could imagine yourself, for example, cutting your finger off as you're missing the piece of wood. So definitely very important to be able to have acute pain. Then there's the resolution of pain, which is after you've had the acute injury, that pain has to resolve. And there's a series of molecules that are involved in the resolution of inflammation and pain. Now, if you can't resolve the pain, it can become chronic pain. And that's where we're going to focus most of our time today. And how do we go about treating chronic pain is typically with drugs. And Dr. O will have more to say about that. I'll just touch on it here. Now, what's the problem in treating chronic pain with drugs? There are side effects. Addiction, in the case of opioids. Steroids are very good for curbing pain, but then you get side effects. The loss of the enamel in your teeth, just being one example of a side effect. And also in the case of steroids and other medications, you get a tapering off of benefits. So when you first try to control pain with a steroid, at first you're very happy, it does its job, and then you have to keep applying a higher dose to get a benefit, and pretty soon it's not doing much of anything. So we do need another solution to combat pain. The next slide here, just to show you some examples of neuropathic pain, which is simply pain caused by damage to the nervous system. And you can look at the various conditions, this being a guide put out by the European Federation of Neurological Societies. So we can look at diabetes, we can look at neuralgia, we can look at central pain. And you can see the first line drugs and the second to third line drugs is inevitably opioids, which we know we've had so much problems with in terms of addiction. And only in the case of multiple sclerosis, MS, are cannabinoids currently recommended. So with respect to hemp, CBD molecules, Ph.D, what are the active components that play a role in modulating pain? So in this slide, I've marked the molecules with a large asterisk to show the molecules that have been published to modulate pain. And they include CBDA, CBCA, CBD, which is our main focus today, CBN, and also THC. And I won't speak much more about this today, but there's a lot of interest these days in the terpenoid-like molecules like beta-caryophyllene found in hemp and other CBD preparations. In my review of the literature, it's still up in the air as to how these terpenoid-like molecules actually work. People talk about so-called entourage effects, which means that molecules come together to have an overall positive effect on physiology, including pain. But I would say for these terpenoid-like molecules, it's still under investigation, a lot to learn. So we're used to hearing, if you've been around the CBD phytocannabinoid field for a while, you've probably heard of the receptors CB1 and CB2. CB1 being mainly in the brain, but also in the periphery, and CB2 being in the skin and also in immune cells. But there's actually a lot more receptors and other means in which CBD can affect pain. As shown in the graphic here, there's in fact, first row of that table, there are 76 different targets that CBD could affect and influence pain. So we're talking about a very complex system. And one of the challenges with CBDs is, one, depending on the dose, you can see different benefits, different effects. Sometimes it's anti-inflammatory, sometimes it's pro-inflammatory, depending on the dose. And then you have another challenge is that the CBDs can be tested in different biological systems, such as in vitro, in cells, in animals, or in humans. And depending on which system you're using, you can observe different effects. And last, carry over from the previous slide, CBD is not typically in isolation. It's present with other compounds. There can be THC present and other phytocannabinoids present in the system, all of which can influence pain. So overall, a very complex system to understand. In the next slide here, I'm not going to go incredibly deep on this, but I've looked at some of the receptors that have been published to influence pain, specifically the ones that are marked with the large asterisk. So look at CBD is in the center of the slide, and CBD can affect adenosine A1 receptors, which then influence pain. It can influence the 5-HT1A receptors. That's the receptor shown on the left. It can influence the so-called vanilloid receptors. This is the receptor that's involved with hot peppers. It can influence opioid receptors, the one showed MOR. Now, interestingly, CBD does not have, at least at physiological levels, a direct effect on binding itself to CB1 and CB2 receptors, but it can synergistically have influence the ability of other molecules to bind to CB1 and CB2 receptors, and that can include its ability to antagonize the ability of THC to bind to CB1 and CB2 receptors. So you can start to see, depending on the preparation you're using, you could see much differences in how it's going to affect pain, whether there's THC present and at what level the THC might be present. And if you look at the legend on the bottom, you can get a sense of all the different molecular mechanisms by which CBD can affect these receptors. An agonist, meaning it binds to the receptor, a partial agonist, meaning it binds but with weak affinity, an antagonist, meaning it influences the ability of another molecule to bind to the receptor, and an inhibitor, meaning it blocks the action of that receptor. And now, in this next set of slides, I'm just going to touch on a few points, and you can start again to see, here I've broken out some of these receptors. GPCR are your G protein coupled receptors that most people learn about in biology classes. It's a common class of receptors. And CB1 and CB2 receptors are G protein coupled receptors. The next slide showing how CBD can influence pain via affecting ion channels, like sodium channels. And you can see all the different possibilities there. Here, this is the transport targets. Well, remember this, if you've taken CBD orally or even through the skin, if it were able to pass into the bloodstream, it somehow has to get into the interior of the cell to have an influence. And so we need various transport proteins to get the CBD into the cell to exert its action. And some of these are these FADPs, which are fatty acid binding proteins. As well, when you take a CBD or THC or any phytocannabinoid, for it to have an influence on the brain, it needs to get across the blood-brain barrier. And there are specific proteins that allow these molecules to get into the brain to exert their action. In this next slide, these are enzyme targets of CBD. And I wanted to just give one example of how CBD can influence, have an effect on these enzymes. So THC is broken down by the enzyme CP2C9. It's a cytochrome P450 enzyme. And CBD may increase levels of THC by decreasing its breakdown via this molecular target. So again, you see the complex interaction of an interplay between CBD and THC. So now turning to this next slide, let's look a little more deeply at how CBDs can affect pain at the level of the brain and the periphery. So in this graphic, we see the brain at the top, the brain stem, and then the spinal cord, and finally the periphery. So if you think about a pain response, let's say you had an injury in the parts of your body outside the brain, there's a signaling mechanism to bring that signal through your nerve system so that your brain senses it. And then if it's a so-called appropriate signal, then the brain tells you there's pain and you feel that pain. And you can also have pain that starts at the level of the brain because you think you've experienced pain. And then in both cases, you experience a pain response. And then the pain can be a mild pain or an intense pain. And in people, that's usually measured on something called the visual analog scale, or a VAS. So if you're a person that has chronic pain and you're asking the question, should I take CBD? And we talked before about some of the challenges in using drugs to treat chronic pain. So on the left of this graphic are the advantages. It can be effective. It can improve your quality of life. It can be bioavailable. It may not have psychoactive effects, particularly if the levels of THC are low. It can improve sleep. And it can be made into a pharmaceutical formulation, meaning the composition of it would be more exactly known. On the other hand, lacking long-term studies for CBDs and pain, that's true. A lot of the studies are in animals. And the clinical trials that are done tend to be with few subjects and short-term. The analgesic or pain effect is disease-specific. There's lack of regulation for commercial products, and we know the regulation throughout the world change pretty much by the week. Contamination of the preparations themselves is a big issue. And also I could say the levels of CBD and other phytocannabinoids is often not what's said on the label. And there could be some teratogenicity, a negative effect on the growth of offspring. I happen to live in the Minneapolis area, and the Mayo Institute is a world famous health institute, mostly medical doctors. They also have a series of doctors that look at and have taken an interest in CBD and phytocannabinoids. Largely, the reason the Mayo Institute takes such an interest is a large amount of people that come into the Mayo are on alternative treatments, supplements, CBDs, and so on. So they put together a team and they wrote a very nice, extensive paper in 2019. And these are their conclusions as regards using CBDs and cannabinoids to treat pain. So the preclinical evidence is strong. And this is largely rodent models. One of the rodent models of pain that I've used is the hot plate model. It doesn't harm the mouse. It's usually done with a mouse. You put the mouse on a hot plate, and if you have CBDs present in the system, the mouse sits on that hot plate longer before it starts licking its foot. So you actually measure the time to the first lick as the model. So CBD is useful for treating addiction via its effects on the amygdala. And so that's positive. CBD is being used to reduce heroin-seeking behavior via modulation of the dopamine and serotonin reward systems. CBD is an attractive option for treating chronic pain with respect to opioid abuse. So in other words, you can get the doctors want to get people desperately off of opioids and give them an alternative, and CBD could be an attractive option. And there's not much risk in the safety profile of CBDs, assuming a pharmaceutical preparation were used. We said on the previous slide, most of the trials have been done with small pilot human studies, so we're definitely needing more longer-term, expensive, double-blind, randomized type of trials. And skip that next bullet point. And I wanted to say, I think this was in Dr. O's presentation as well, that when we speak about pain, anxiety and stress exacerbates pain and keeps it going and makes it chronic. So if CBDs can control anxiety and stress, that will have a major influence on pain. And that's what I have. Thank you very much for your attention.
So next up, we'll have Dr. O.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen right quick. Yeah, so I'm titling my session of this presentation, Robocop to the Rescue, CBD Aspirin Regimen. And before we go on, I'm just gonna have a little disclaimer. The presentation is for medical, for educational purposes. It's not for medical advice. We are not claiming that CBD or any cannabinoid heal, cure, or treat any diseases. As at the time of this presentation, over-the-counter medication supplement like cannabinoid, like CBD, they are still not FDA approved. We need you to consult with your primary provider for all your medical needs. So what are you gonna learn from this presentation? In this presentation, most of the stuff I'm gonna be talking about is kind of intercepted with Dr. Berger. It's all good. That is the way we roll in the science world. So bear with us. When you hear it more times, hearing by the word of God, it sticks in there. So we're gonna learn a little bit about pain, signs and symptoms of pain, conventional management of pain. And my wonderful Robocop will come back, that's CBD as a regimen for pain. And we're gonna conclude. So what is pain? Basically, it's subjective. When I say subjective, what does that even mean? Basically, pain is what the sufferer says it is. If you come into the pharmacy and you say, oh, my pain is 10, and Matt come in and say, oh, mine is 5. It's not my position to say, okay, how can your own pain be 10 and Matt's pain is 5? No, pain is pain. It is what the sufferer says it is. And just a little while ago, Dr. Berger talks about acute pain, chronic pain. I'm just gonna mention a few things that didn't come up, which is acute pain can also manifest itself in form of secondary symptoms like hypertension, high blood pressure. You know, it's basic and it makes sense. Like if you have pain, like you burn your hand, your heart start beating really fast. You can experience that pain if you are the type that already have a high blood pressure. Your blood pressure can just go up high. And when it comes to the chronic pain, I mean, when you go, take for example, cancer pain due to cancer, It's depressing to know you have this disease, the anxiety of even treatment and all that. So pain can, in a chronic form, can also manifest itself in form of depression. What are the signs and symptoms that we can see with sharp, dull, tingling? All those are some of the signs that we see. So how do we manage pain in a conventional therapy? When I say conventional, I'm just saying like traditional pharmaceutics, like your medicine. We manage pain. The first thing we go, when I burn my finger, where do I go? I run to the pharmacy, try to grab over the counter like Tylenol and ibuprofen. These are what we call non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And basically, they help with inflammation. What does inflammation mean? It means that swelling, just like Dr. Berger said earlier. So that's the first line of therapy that when we are dealing with pain. And the problem with product like NSAID, which is Tylenol, ibuprofen, is that they tend to have a risk of bleeding, internal, what we call internal bleeding. There's a risk of liver or kidney injury. When we are talking about this type of side effect, who are the people that tends to use this product the most? It's mostly in the elderly population. They already have a tendency to have this side effect as a result of all the medication they are taking. So when you begin to give them ibuprofen, Tylenol, that can aggravate the situation. Then we go on to steroid. I'm sure some of us have gone to the doctor, like they say, okay, this pain is not going away. What are we gonna do next? We're gonna give you a steroid injection. Really, when they start bringing out steroid injection, that is the big gun. I call it the big gun. But like Dr. Berger said, some of the side effects are just unbearable. Imagine we are spending so much money to lose weight, but some of the side effects of steroid is weight gain, heart disease, aggression. Nobody wants that, you know. And the other product that we use is opioid, like Dr. Berger said. Normally, opioid is supposed to be the last resort, but we all have seen, especially here in our country, the damage opioid has done to the population. When you go to some provider, you say, oh, my head hurt, Pam, I'm gonna give you fentanyl. And you are opioid now, you haven't even taken it before, you know? So this opioid causes physiological, psychological dependence. Basically, it gets stuck to the brain, and what happens, you get addicted to it, and that can, we experience overdose from it. So many individuals we have lost to opioid epidemics. And now I'm going to have my RoboCop CBD as pain regimen. Study shows that number one reason why people go to cannabinoid like CBD is pain. Pain is the number one reason why people do this. And CBD has been shown to reduce inflammation, just like Dr. Berger mentioned earlier, better compared to conventional therapy like ibuprofen. And in fact, they have also shown in clinical studies that it's up to 10 to 20 times better than the ibuprofen. And for the steroid, like hydrocortisone, dexamethasone, all those Medrol dose pack, 2 to 3 times cannabinoids like CBD is been shown to be better. And these are supposed to be our big guns. If this cannabinoid plant medicine is even 2 to 3 times better than our big guns, then we are really in trouble here. And one of the unique things that we notice in CBD, like when you look at all that receptor that Dr. Berger was talking about, is called multitasking. Look at, for example, the GABA receptor. When you think of GABA receptor, think of your gabapentin. So we're talking about CBD binding to the GABA receptor. When you think of your gabapentin, what do you think of? Just go ahead and think of your diabetic neuropathy. When you talk about diabetic neuropathy, it means that tingling pain that people that are suffering from diabetes, they go through. So basically, if CBD is binding to that GABA receptor, it is the same mechanism of action that our gabapentin is using to help us manage neuropathic pain that we get from diabetes, to help us manage the neuropathic pain that we get from our shingles. Yes, shingles, shingles is due to neuropathic pain, and we use gabapentin and lidocaine patch to help us manage that. So CBD is able to help us manage that, other than the inflammation. So we have it managing neuropathic pain. We also have it helping us with inflammation. Some studies have even shown that most of the diseases that we are seeing right now is directly or indirectly related to inflammation. So this is a big Robocop. It's huge. For example, when you look at the pain, if it's helping us to manage the pain, it causes us to be calm. And from you being calm, it could lead you to be able to sleep better. And apart from all that, we were talking about opioid addiction and everything. Up to now, we do not even have any documentation that shows opioid overdose or overdose of CBD or anything like that. The only thing that came close to that was when the FDA last year, they were worried about the hepatic toxicity. When I say hepatic toxicity, I'm just talking about the liver. Why is that? Because CBD, cannabinoid like CBD, is broken down in the liver, but everybody don't have to use edible, you know. You can use patches, you can use tincture. So these ones, they don't go through your liver, they go straight through your bloodstream. Just like when you get fentanyl, it passes straight into your bloodstream and doesn't go through the liver. So we can manage this stuff. We are able to do that. Basically, what is the conclusion? Before I even go into that, me as a person, I grew up as a little girl in Nigeria. And from me being a little girl, we use medicinal herbs. That's what brought me into this space. Everybody, they don't just get you and take you to the hospital. We use it as a preventive medicine, and we use it. There's barely any ailment in the African community that they don't have a medicinal herb or plant medicine to help. Does that mean everything has to be treated with plant medicine? No, but we can use it as an add-on to what we are doing right now. So what am I saying here? Plant medicine, especially CBD, is not the boogeyman. These are plant medicine, just like your garlic, your ginger, they are plant-based. Like I said, does that mean we're gonna run and grab it anywhere? That is where companies like Mass Media Organization, CBD Health and Wellness magazines, and their affiliate companies like this, that's where they come in, because they are providing us evidence-based data that we can educate ourselves and choose the right product for ourselves. So I believe CBD and plant medicine, they are priceless gifts of nature to us to help us in this dying world. And we should be grateful, have gratitude in our heart to accept this gift of nature. Hopefully the power that be will begin to loosen up and chill and try to take a second look, not just at CBD, yeah, I know CBD has a little freedom, but there's so much gray area that is just, you know. So we hope, hopefully everything will be resolved in the new year, especially with COVID, with our economy. I mean, can you imagine how we can bring back our economy with this amazing product? Anyway, that is what I have for you today. For anybody that would like to know more about cannabinoid toppings, basically my focus is on healthcare professionals, dispensaries, cannabinoid, alternative medicine enthusiasts. They want to know more. I'm currently putting together a course that we're going to be talking about role of cannabinoid in the management of various diseases. If you want to know more, this is my book, A Pharmacist's Guide to Cannabis, Perspective of a Non-Conforming Clinician. It's basic, zero medical jargon, straight to the point, and you can use it as a reference. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm very appreciative. And I'm going to hand it over to Matt to take it from here. Hey, Matt, it's time.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Noah.
Yes.
I actually have that book, so thank you for the presentation, and thank you everyone for having us on. So my name is Matt Curan. I am based here in San Diego, California. I am the co-founder of Helmand Valley Growers Company. I'm a little bit of a wild card in this panel. I am not a doctor. I'm a 20-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I spent the last 10 years of my career in Marine Special Operations Command, which is an organization under Special Operations Command, otherwise known as SOCOM. And I'm a veteran of multiple combat tours of Iraq and Afghanistan. So after I transitioned out of the military, I entered into life science working for a CMO. We were responsible for manufacturing assays and reagents. We moved into lyophilization and then into sterile filling. So I am very familiar with, the research and some of sort of the medical things that are out there and the initiatives to help get after those. I had worked for about 2 years in that field when I ran into two former teammates at a friend's birthday party and began talking just about our observations, our generation that transitioned out, the generation before us, and what we saw with veterans combating their ailments, whether they be mental, emotional, or physical, with alcohol. The myriad of prescription pills that were issued out. I'm a patient. I can speak specifically towards the prescription pills that were thrown at every single ailment that I had, and the opioid epidemic that really is plaguing our nation, and that both doctors have spoken about. And it was during that time, during that conversation, one of my teammates said, I was actually heavy into drinking, and I gave up a fifth of Jack for a joint. And we kind of stopped for a minute because being 20 years in the military, you don't hear that very often. And so we had him explain a little bit. And he goes, yeah, I was unfortunately self-medicating with alcohol, and one day just stopped. And I transitioned not only into cannabis as a form of relief, but I also transitioned my lifestyle into gardening, which has helped the therapy and the therapeutics. And now he's a full-time gardener. He's actually one of our co-founders, who is our chief cultivator for Helmand Valley Growers Company. And so we thought, there might be something to the cannabinoids and the natural plant treatment for a lot of the things that either we were looking towards prescription medication to mask, not treat, or we were totally ignoring it and just living with the pain day in and day out. And so we began attending seminars and conferences, and the more we learned, the more we realized that there was actually something to this plant. And to the ability or to the capability of cannabinoids for treatment. And so we traveled to Washington, D.C. We spoke with members of Congress. We met with the VA committee. We discussed what our observations and what our thoughts were, what our hypothesis was. And we were met with openness and a little reservation. And we're told, if you can bring data to us, to the floor, we'd be willing to review it and potentially put it up for vote to see if we can change the VA medical system and to allow cannabis as a prescription medication. And so right now we're in the process of, we have an IRB written, an institutional review board written with the protocol, which would allow us to conduct human research trials using cannabis under doctor supervision with strict criteria, and a series of three phases of research to understand better and record the data using veterans with symptoms of post-traumatic stress, pain, sleeplessness, nausea, anxiety, stress, and more symptoms with cannabis to determine whether or not which we all have spoken. And I think the reason we're on this panel is because we believe deep down in our hearts and very passionate that yes, it does actually help for all the reasons, again, both doctors mentioned before and articulated expertly. So that is sort of what brought me into the cannabis industry. I had not been part of it prior to that. It was not a consumer or a patient of cannabis or cannabinoids prior to that. But now believe very strongly because of what I've seen and the feedback that we've gotten from the veteran and non-veteran community with our products, and just the relief that they've never received before, whether it be a full night's sleep, whether it be their symptoms of pain, their true pain finally being addressed and not masked, and just living a better, more enriching, more fulfilling life. We knew that the research with our THC side of cannabis was going to take several years in the making before we got through all three of our phases and submitted for an FDA certification. In the meantime, we said, there's a whole nation out there that is suffering from the effects of post-traumatic stress. It doesn't matter if you're a banker. It doesn't matter if you're an accountant. It doesn't matter if you're a veteran. It doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home dad, right? We all deal with anxiety. We all deal with stress. We all deal with pain. There's something in our lives that we can use a cannabinoid for to specifically give us a more enriching, more fulfilling life. And every single person in our nation, every single person in the world deserves that. And that's what led us down into CBD. So we were able to partner with an outstanding husband-wife team who is actually has been in the pharmaceutical world for 25 years. She left that because she saw the unfortunately the addiction of prescription pills and really the work of her hand, as she self-admitted, and entered CBD, and they have a hemp farm with manufacturing. She has used all of her expertise within the pharmaceutical world to help her formulate and fill CBD products. And, it's just outstanding to be a part of something that's just great and growing. Specifically for myself, and I'm looking at the time here, I think I've spent about 7 minutes sort of talking about our history and where we are now. And then I like to use the rest of the time just speaking from a personal perspective. So I was in the military for 20 years. And, whenever you're in something, in that kind of space, you get bumps, you get bruises. I am 100% disabled. The three co-founders of Helmand Valley Growers Company are 100% disabled. We're a disabled for-purpose company. And so I can specifically speak to and relate to all the symptoms that we discussed today on this panel, whether it be head injuries, whether it be emotional, psychological, or the actual pains that I have now, whether with shoulder pain, back pain, knee pain, wrist pains, multiple surgeries, and some elected not surgeries. Again, as good as the VA is, and they're a wonderful industry, they've treated me very well. They are limited in the tools, and quite often, as I think all of our medical facilities do, rely on prescriptions to address whatever symptoms we're presenting. And unfortunately, those prescription pills mask, they don't necessarily treat, and they come with a myriad of side effects as well, which again, unfortunately, you get more pills for. And so I had a cabinet full of prescription pills and found myself throwing away bottles of unopened pills because they had expired, because I had so many pills stacked on top of pills. And, I told my primary care manager, I'm not going to live out of a bottle. I'm not going to take one pill for pain and take another pill for the side effect of that pain and take another pill for the side effect of the pill that I took for the pain to start with. And I, said, I'm a co-founder of a company, a for-purpose company that I believe passionately in. There's absolutely no reason that I shouldn't be, utilizing this medicine that I so confidently educate others about. And I'm so proud to stand behind. And so I began using cannabis and using CBD to address the insomnia that I dealt with, to address the pain symptoms that I have dealt with, and just to live a better, more fulfilling life. And I keep saying that because I truly, truly believe that's really the heart of everything that we're doing. So, whether it be a drop or a gel capsule, to help me go to sleep. Or as Dr. Ohanba, said, we have topical creams that I use for my wrists. I have double carpal tunnel double carpal tunnel surgery. So both wrists have been worked on. And those get sore and they're aches and pains, and I can tell when the weather's changing and I know when it's about to rain, as funny as that sounds. But I do use creams for my wrists and for my shoulder. I have a slap tear. I have arthritis in both collarbones, and I have very little cartilage in both knees. And my use of CBD, my use of the cannabinoids do help me get up. I love being active. I surf, I mountain bike, I hike. I just enjoy, I'm in my mid 40s. I would like to live another 40 years plus, and I would like to do so actively and with a smile on my face. And I have to say that when we talk about something as powerful as this plant-derived medicine is, with very, very little, if any, side effects, that is non-addictive. I've been on both sides of the spectrum now, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I'm, have no plans on ever going back to the prescription side. And I have every intention on staying on this side, whether it be CBD or whether it be, a THC-derived cannabinoid. It is absolutely a pleasure to be here now. And I just applaud all the work that's being done, the acceptance and really the push of the industry, whether, you have a Ph.D. and you're a doctor, or you're within the industry and your heart is with growing hemp or growing cannabis and truly enjoy the genetics and the science of the plant and what it can do for people. It's a phenomenal industry. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored that I have an opportunity to be here. Never in a million years did I think I would grow up and do this. But I'm here now, and I love it. And I take every opportunity I can just to educate as many people as I can come in contact with on not only the amazing people, but the amazing effects and capabilities that we've all discussed and yet to be discovered, right? Because every day I think we learn something new about what this plant can do. And every day we get, closer and closer to truly understanding the medicine to a point where it can be a prescribable medicine. And that's really our key focus again with the company we co-founded, is to get enough data to be able to go to the floor and show Congress that, listen, if we have this in a microdosed prescribable format, that we can actually address, a diagnosis, and a doctor can write a prescription for this medicine, and a patient can go and get it from a pharmacy, just like anything else. And I think that, the big push is to normalize it and get it to that point. So thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate this conversation. I can't wait to stay tuned and again, see what all this amazing, fabulous work is going to do for us as a nation. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you also to Dr. Berger as well as Dr. O. This was a wonderful discussion. We're so grateful for you all to share your time and your expertise with us. And now we'll stay tuned and take some questions from the audience. So thank you again.